I am told by the pundits in Washington that an indictment, Cenk, of Hillary Clinton, that's not going to be relevant. It's either not going to happen, or if it does, it's no big deal to get indicted in the middle of a presidential run. Really? Okay, now, what they never tell you, by the way, is the guy running the FBI is James Comey. He's a longtime Republican. He worked under George Bush. Now, he deserves a lot of credit because he defied an order under Bush, which was of great principle, and it was on a constitutional issue. And I give credit back then. But remember that when he did that, he was the #2 person under John Ashcroft at the Justice Department of George W. Bush. He was #2 to Ashcroft. The dude's a serious Republican. And of course, in a genius move, Barack Obama was like, oh, I know, I'll bring the Republicans and the Democrats together. I'll take that Republican and put him as the head of the FBI. And then while the Democrats are running a really important election, he'll get to decide when he indicts our candidate. Oops. Now, I don't know how political James Comey is. Obviously, he did a great job of not being political under the Bush administration. He stood up to them. So I'm not giving him credit 18 different times for that at the time and just today, right? But he does hold all the cards in his hands. So now I'm going to go to a couple of Republicans here to give you a sense of how the investigation is going. And then I want to tell you at the end what could happen in this investigation. So first we go to Judge Napolitano on Fox News. I know that he can be clownish at times, or a lot of times, but understand that unfortunately in this insane world we live in, this guy is super relevant. You know why? One of the reasons why is because when Trump was asked who he'd put on the Supreme Court, he mentioned Napolitano, a guy who plays a judge on TV for Fox News. Now, I know he was a real judge at one point too. That's so embarrassing. He picked a TV pundit like this. Anyway, so here's Napolitano on this FBI investigation.
You have been on record as saying that she broke the law. You, the judge, have convicted her on television. Are you ashamed?
No, not at all. The evidence of her guilt is overwhelming. The question, overwhelming to anybody who observed what she did and knows what the FBI knows.
Then it has to be overwhelming to the Bureau then, right?
Absolutely. And
so
the FBI knows a lot more about it than I do.
If the Democrats that run the Justice Department decide that she's not going to be indicted because she's about to become or will have become the Democratic nominee for president, can you imagine what the reaction will be? The FBI will release the evidence against her, much of which is already publicly known.
Okay, so don't get thrown by O'Reilly pretending to be against him. Like, oh, aren't you embarrassed that it hasn't happened yet? It's actually a softball for him to say, no, I've said dozens of FBI agents looking into the case. Tommy Christopher on media corrected me today and said, no, there's only 12 FBI agents looking into the case, right, and investigating her. I'm not sure that's really helping her cause. Anyway, and don't get distracted by him talking about the Democrats in the Justice Department. As I just told you, the guy who's the head of the FBI is a hardcore Republican. What the relevant part of that clip is him saying, hey, listen, you don't think there's all these people at the FBI who are already our sources and ready to leak if there's no indictment and tell you what the real evidence is against her? Now, maybe those leaks don't hurt her that much, and that's a fair hypothesis to have, but saying that evidence won't come out won't fly. It's nowhere near reasonable. In fact, I'll go to another Republican for you guys to give you a sense of how much they know that they're going to get the leaks. Senator Chuck Grassley said, and if there's a political interference, and then I assume that somebody in the FBI is going to leak these reports, and it's either going to have an effect politically or it's going to lead to prosecution if there's enough evidence. So at a bare minimum, the Republicans already know who their sources are that are going to leak all the information out to the press in the middle of a presidential run. Okay, way to pick the more electable candidate. I know, Democrats and the party and the establishment are geniuses. Okay, then number two, very bad case scenario is she gets indicted. Now, again, everybody in Washington is like, oh, please. Based on what? If there's a dozen FBI agents investigating her, they're not doing that for their health. They're going to come to a conclusion. How in the world would they know, the pundits know, what the conclusion of that super secret investigation is? Oh, no, please, I do declare. I already know. Well, of course they won't indict her. How the hell would you know that? If you've got a dozen people investigating you, actually the odds are overwhelmingly that they will indict you. Now, I guess the last possible scenario is they indict her and they say, okay, we're charging you with all these criminal actions, but then the pundits tell me, oh, that's no big deal. That's no big deal. Now, let's see if they would have said that under different circumstances. Let's say there was a dozen FBI investigators looking into Bernie Sanders, and they were going to indict him any day now. Do you think the pundits on TV would have been like, oh, no big deal, no big deal? No, they would have been like, oh, Bernie Sanders, I mean, what a radical. He's practically a criminal. They're investigating him. He's got to get out of the race. He's got to get out of the race. The FBI is about to arrest the guy. He's got to get out of the race. Okay, if it was Donald Trump, I mean, look, I know the press is giving him a ton of coverage, but yeah, they would have blown up over it. Oh my God, Donald Trump's about to get arrested. Certainly a good chance that that's the case. But with Hillary Clinton, shh. Not relevant, not relevant, not relevant. The establishment likes her. Shh. Not relevant, not relevant, not relevant. Okay, let me just give you two scenarios where it could be enormously relevant. If James Comey is actually a partisan Republican, and that's a big if, right? I don't know. And he wanted to do maximum damage to the Democrats. You know when he would announce the indictment? The last day of the Democratic convention. Oof. So instead of getting the bounce from the convention, at almost the worst possible time, you would get hit with an indictment, gigantically bad news leading into the general election and taking the wind out of your sails. At this point, if you think that's not possible, well, either you're grossly ignorant or you're lying, because of course it's possible. Okay, now the timing, there's no way to know, right? But that's one horrific scenario, which is certainly possible. Okay, now let's talk about another terrible timing scenario. Right before the California primary. Now, why would that be damaging? You know that 80% of the votes in California are actually mail-in ballots? So, and mail-in ballots, Hillary Clinton does much better in. Bernie Sanders does better on the day of the election. So if you indicted her a couple of days before the Democratic voting in California, well, you know what you'd have? You'd have utter chaos. You'd have Bernie Sanders win enough delegates to make a case to the superdelegates that they should back him, but not win enough delegates outright where she's not the nominee. So then that would screw up the whole Democratic primary system. That would create chaos within the superdelegates, within the convention, and possibly blow up the convention as well. And then you have a wounded and hobbling, possibly Hillary Clinton, coming out of the convention in disastrous shape. But the pundits say, hear no evil, or I don't want to say evil because it's very disputed as to the substance of these charges. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the political reality of what will happen once these charges do come in, okay? So let's just say, see no indictment, hear no indictment, and speak no indictment. And that's what the pundits are doing right now. But the reality is, there's a dozen FBI agents hot on her trail, and very likely there will be an indictment. How much damage it does? Well, as I just told you, it can do anywhere from, yeah, it's possible they release it at a benign time and she somehow brushes it off. Possible, right? All the way to nuclear fallout, disaster. Oh my God, is she going to be the candidate? I don't know. We've got a mess of a convention. And if she walks out of there in any way, shape, or form, she is seriously in trouble heading into the general election. So that's the situation the brilliant Democratic establishment has put the Democratic Party into. And then they had the nerve to complain that the Sanders crowd might be helping Trump. You know what helps Trump? This.